Welcome to the third ever episode of Keeping Up College Football. We took a hiatus over the summer. I got really busy, but we're back and we got a very full show. We're going to break down my preseason top 25. People have had a lot of things to say about where I've got these teams, but let me state my case. Then we're going to go into the best games of the 2026 season, and the games that I think will end up shaping what the national title race will look like. Then let's go through the SEC and the Big Ten. I put them into tiers. We're going to go through each tier, see which teams are going to be at the top of those conferences, and see which teams are going to be down in the basement. And the next episode, we're going to do the same thing for the Big 12 and the ACC. And then the Heisman, the most prestigious award in college football. I have a couple honorable mentions. I got 4 guys that I think will be invited to New York. We're going to break them down. We're going to explain what needs to go right for them to take home the trophy, and maybe what could go wrong and prevent them from ending up winning it. And then finally, there are teams in 2026 where it is now or never. If they do not get it done, if their coaching staffs don't get it done, they'll be fired, or their rosters are just built to win it all this year. And they're kind of teams where I look at it, and if it's not now, it might just be never. We're going to look at those schools. And then, as we do every single episode, we're going to finish it off with my North Dakota State Bison. And we're going to look into 2026 and really kind of break down the roster, break down each position, and figure out what they will look like. So starting off with my top 25. Realistically, 15 through like 35, maybe even 15 through 40, especially in the preseason, you can throw so many different teams there. But right now, my last 5 in is South Carolina, Missouri, USC, Penn State, and SMU. Starting off with South Carolina, why are they ranked? A lot of people don't want to see them ranked. Well, they have so much talent, and if you want to win, particularly in the SEC, I think you need 2 things. You need elite level quarterback play, and I think LaNorris Sellers can give it to you, especially in stretches. And then you need a guy or 2 to come off the edge and disrupt games. I think Dylan Stewart's one of the most talented college football players in the entire country. I think he'll probably be a top 5 to 10 pick, and I think that they can really break up games, and it's why I put them here, although obviously last season was quite the failure. At 24, I have Missouri. Really just out of respect for what Eli Drinkwitz has built. He's been one of the most consistent programs in the SEC. It's very difficult to do, especially at Missouri. I got them at 24. At 23, I have USC. A lot of people want to put them in the top 15, maybe even higher, but here's what I'll tell you. They look a lot like Clemson and LSU did a season ago when they were preseason ranked top 7 teams and then really didn't have very successful years. Yes, there's so much returning production. This is not a video game. They're not just all going to go up 4 overalls. My worry is there will not be enough improvement and they'll look very similar to how they did last year. And yes, make no mistake, this is a power rankings, but when you look at that USC schedule, I see Oregon, I see Indiana, I see Ohio State, and then I see a handful of teams in like that Michigan tier of the Big 10, excuse me. I don't know if they can A, win all those games against teams that they're in the same tier, and then B, beat the really good squad. Penn State, very opposite. They have a stupidly easy schedule, but there's also so much experience on this roster. Rockdo Beckett is a guy who's just played on so many games. Matt Campbell brought in a ton of guys full of experience. That warrants putting them inside of the top 25. 21, I have SMU. I think Kevin Jennings is really good. The coaching staff has shown that they've been pretty solid. I think the defense will be good. They got the running back transfer from Cal. He should be solid. I just think it's one of those teams that's going to end up somewhere around 9-3. Then you get to Houston. I think Connor Wigman's really good. Very similar to SMU. It's just kind of a roster that they retained a lot. They built a little bit. They got returning quarterback play, returning back coach. Though that will put you in the top 25 when you were a 9-win team a season ago. Then I have Iowa, Washington, and Michigan. And I'm going to kind of group these guys all together that they all have massive question marks. For Washington, it's just, can everything kind of come together? Can that defense look good? Can the skill positions rebound? Because they did lose some pieces to the draft, guys like Denzel Boston. How will that kind of shape up? And then for Michigan and Iowa, quite frankly, it's quarterback play. We know the defenses are going to be great. We know the run game is going to be good. Do you have explosive quarterback play? And then how good are the wide receivers? Because Mark Gronowski really had Iowa a handful of plays away from being truly special last season, although it didn't fully happen, but there were certain signs. And then Michigan, obviously, Bryce Underwood. Louisville at 16. I really like Louisville next year. I think Isaac Brown's one of the best players in the country. That defense I love, especially up front. Linebackers, my biggest worry is the secondary. I think there is a little bit to be desired back there. And then how good is Lincoln Knault's going to be? In my opinion, he's going to be really good. When you looked at the guys who recruited him, it was Kalen DeBoer. It was NDSU, who's put 5 straight quarterbacks in the NFL. Looked right there. And it was Ohio State. And to me, if those guys want you, you're a good quarterback. They're all much smarter than me. Wide receiver worries me a little bit, but once again, pretty easy ACC schedule. They're going to win a lot of games. Then I've got a lot of flack for this. Texas A&M and Ole Miss are behind BYU and Utah. And this is the way that I see it. BYU and Utah are two teams where when you put them against top 8 to 10 teams in America, they are not going to play incredibly well. But that's because they don't see that level of competition very often. And here's my point. BYU and Utah, if either of them make the playoffs, they're going to play top 7 teams, they might get blown out. I could see a world where Texas A&M and Ole Miss get blown out by top 10 teams too. If Texas A&M turns the ball over too much, it's going to look how Texas A&M looked last year. It was kind of close. You could convince yourself that you could win, but Texas handled that game. And then for Ole Miss, there's just so much new. Yes, your top 2 players came back on offense. That's awesome. Wide receiver is a massive question. You lost your best edge rusher, and why is South Carolina ranked? Because they can get to the quarterback. At least on paper, they should be able to. Well, can Ole Miss do that and do that at the level of a top 10 team? Can they look like, the way an Oklahoma defense might look this season? But that's why they are where they are. And then for Utah, quarterback plays could be good. A lot of people are like, well, they lost so much up front. So many other players went to Michigan. That's awesome. I think Morgan Scaley is going to be a very good coach. Am I giving them the benefit of the doubt? Absolutely. And then BYU, you return your quarterback. They've just been such a consistent program. I don't see how anybody can argue for them to not be in that 10 to 15 range. Once again, inside of the top 10, can they beat those teams? No. We watched Texas Tech obliterate them twice a season ago, but I'm not putting them in the top 10. Then I have LSU at 11. Yes. Were they bad a season ago? Absolutely. But that transfer portal was elite. And what I think they honestly have, and this is their big X factor, I think they have probably the 2 best coordinators in the country. At least the best, pair of coordinators. Very similar to what Oregon had a season ago when they had Tosh and they had Will Stein. I think LSU's coordinators are elite. I think the talent's absolutely there. Do they have the foundation that the teams in the top 10 have in terms of how great the returning production is? No. And that's why they're at 11 instead of inside of the top 10. But let's get inside of the top 10. Oklahoma, my biggest worry, quite frankly, how good's your offensive line going to be? How good's your run game going to be? How much support can you give John Mateer? I was waiting for them to go out and do what Texas did and get a Cam Coleman and get an elite explosive running back like Hollywood Smothers. It just never really materialized. With that being said, John Mateer looks really good. And what happens if they are all healthy? They're going to be really, really solid. And then defensively, they're going to be amazing. The secondary I like, honestly, more than Oklahoma fans have, and I have a little bit more questions about how great the front 4 will be compared to other Oklahoma fans. But here's my big question about Oklahoma. Do you have the best defense in America like you had a year ago? Or are you somewhere around 10? In terms of how great your defense is, because that's going to be absolutely massive. And it's going to be a very similar conversation that we have with Miami here in 1 second, but we'll get to Texas Tech. Quarterback plays, massive question. Their quarterback was not good a season ago. I don't know how great Will Hammond is going to be, but my point is everything around them was so solid that they walked through the Big 12 and played a very competitive game against Oregon. They scored a couple of late touchdowns. They scored a late touchdown. Oregon did that, made that game look ugly. It was more competitive than people remember it being. I think Texas Tech can be really solid. I still think they're pretty much by far the best team in the Big 12. Then I have Alabama at 8. That defense is going to be incredible, and I trust Kalen DeBoer because there are so many questions on that offense. Who's going to be quarterback? Can you run the ball? I look at that wide receiver room and I go, well, what happens if Ryan Williams is not good? Horton's gone. Who's going to step up? And there's some really, really talented guys, but they don't have a ton of production. What's that going to end up looking like? I don't know right now. Honest to God, it worries me a little bit. But I'm going to give Kalen DeBoer the benefit of the doubt. He's earned that when he went to a national championship game at Washington, when he beat Oklahoma a year ago in the playoffs, and it's Alabama. Moving into my top 7, these are my teams that I think can win a national championship. I think everybody outside of the top 7, sure, you have a chance if you're Alabama, Oklahoma, LSU, maybe even Texas Tech, but I think that chance is sub 2%. Inside of the top 10, or top 7, I think it's somewhere around 10 plus. Starting off with Miami. Yes, your returning production is amazing. You have Malachi Tony come back, probably the best backfield in the country. Yes, the defense brought in a bunch of good pieces like Damon Wilson. Will everything line up the way it did a year ago? Because I think you were the hottest team in the country when it mattered at the end of the year, but you necessarily were not the second best, wire to wire. What Miami version do we get? And when you looked at that playoff run, they had the best offensive line in America. It was not close. I mean, they physically manhandled Ohio State. They manhandled Ole Miss, and it's the reason they ended up where they were, along with that great running back tandem. What happens if their offensive line, a lot like Oklahoma's defense, is 10th instead of 1st? What changes? Do you lose a close game against Notre Dame? Does Virginia Tech keep it close? Things like that. It just worries me a little bit. Then I have Ohio State at 6. Revisionist history from a year ago is in Delulu land for Ohio State right now. And people are telling me that they have the best offense in America. Guys, they scored 38 points in the 3 biggest games in the playoffs. Or not in the playoffs, in the Big Ten title game against Texas. They were not like sensational. And you lose 4 of your 5 best defensive players. I think there's a lot left to be desired in terms of returning production. Yes, Jeremiah Smith's the best player in America. Julian Sain looks scared in the big moments. And if your offensive line is not good enough to protect him, he will continue to look small and look scared. With that being said, you do have Julian Sain, who was a 5-star. You do have Jeremiah Smith, who was a 5-star. The defense just brings in talent every single year and just turns out good player after good player. So I'm not absolutely by any means ready to write them off, but I just think there are some very valid questions. Then I have Notre Dame. Notre Dame has to replace the running back room, but CJ Carr is coming back. The offensive line started 3 freshmen a season ago. That's probably one of the best units in the country. And then you look defensively, I don't think anybody's poking much holes at that Notre Dame defense. They can get to the passer with the best of them. Although, I'd like to see guys like Bryce Young, maybe come out a little bit more, look a little more like a LaNorris Sellers, look more like a Colin Simmons, but they're going to be really, really good. And then my X factor, can Notre Dame win a national championship? Can they throw the ball down the field effectively? We don't know yet. It's been the Achilles heel of Notre Dame for some time. I have Indiana at 4. People want to put them 1, 2, 3. I got absolutely no problem with it. They won a national championship. But what I will tell you, there are a lot of questions, especially at quarterback. I think Josh Hoover will be solid. He's not Fernando Mendoza. The wide receiver room should be pretty good. You're returning your 2 coordinators who, if it's not, LSU with 2 of the best in the country, I sure think Indiana has a say in that. You return so much now on defense with the latest NCAA eligibility, changes. And, oh yeah, Brian Haynes is still there. He's great. I got him at 4. They could win a national championship. I won't be shocked at all. At 3, I have Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. I think the run game's elite. I think the offensive line's elite. I think the defense is elite. I think Gunnar Stockton showed a year ago that he almost outdueled Trinidad Chambliss in that game. People forget, he was making play after play. He was taking hit after hit. He was willing them to the win. Well, how great's your wide receiver room going to be? That's the story. You return 8 guys. And then Kirby Smart did it a year ago in the playoffs, and it was very uncharacteristic of him. Don't outcoach yourself, brother. You're elite. You're elite. You won 2 national titles. Play it simple. Don't outcoach yourself. I think Georgia could be right back with an opportunity to win the national title. At 2, I have Texas. Look, I've taken a lot of flack for this. Well, Texas is top 3 every year. First of all, they've made the semifinals 2 of the last 3 years, Secondly, this team looks like 2024 Ohio State. In terms of you return everything, and then you bring in Cam Coleman, you bring in Rasheem Biles, everybody around that program looks like that dude's really, really talented. Melvin Suwani's came in from the ACC. They look like a top 2 roster to me. There's not a hole right now on that roster, other than maybe secondary. Maybe secondary, I'll give it to you. Linebackers elite. Defensive line's elite. Offensive line at least looks elite on paper. Running back room, Hollywood Smothers is a dog. Brown is a dog. Arch Manning looked like he was coming into his own at the end of the year. I got Texas at 2. And then at number 1, I have the Oregon Ducks. You can say what you will about, well, they lost their 2 coordinators. Dan Lanning hasn't won the big game yet. And the key word is yet. But with how much they returned. They were so injury prone a year ago, especially at the wide receiver position. What happens if that room's healthy? What happens if the running backs stay healthy? What happens if they can run the ball? They have great fundamentals. And then I don't think anybody's going to sit here and tell you that secondary is not good. You got Finney, you got Parrish. The defensive line's arguably one of the best in the country. I'm in love with what Oregon could look like in 2026. Now, we have to see it on the field. The regular season's not all that difficult. You pretty much just have that Ohio State game in terms of, national title contenders that you're going to play. But, to me, you look really, really, really good. But this is my top 25. Let me know in the comments exactly what you think of it. Up next, there are a handful of games in college football that will end up basically deciding the season in terms of who makes the college football playoffs and who wins the national championship. So here are my 5 best games that I cannot wait to watch as just a guy who's a degenerate lover of college football. Starting off, they'll be on the list. I knew they'll be on the list. There's no reason to wait. Ole Miss LSU, the game of Lane Kiffin. It's going to be so much fun. The Grove is going to be rocking. And there's a lot of bad blood on that Ole Miss sideline. There's a lot of guys that feel like Lane Kiffin is a snake. He went behind their back. He left. And they want to get revenge. As well as these are 2 teams that right now, you just saw my top 25. I think they're both fairly close to one another. I think home field advantage is a big deal in this game. And when I have one of these teams potentially being 10-2, one of these potentially being 9-3, or somewhere around there, either of them could be honestly 9-3 or 10-2. Well, this is one of those games that kind of decides which one of these 2 teams has the opportunity to make the playoffs. Along with all the other storylines, it's going to be a tremendous game. And let's look at the past as well. People are forgetting, this has been legitimately one of the best rivalries in college football. I was at the Kyron Lacey walk-off game a couple years ago, ended up on the field. That one was incredible. The 24-19 game was great. And then 3 years ago, you had the shootout between these 2 teams. It's truly one of the great rivalries the Magnolia Bowl has been over the last handful of years. And it's going to be one of the best games of the year. Next, everybody loves when 2 top 5 teams clash, and that's going to happen in Austin this year. Texas and Ohio State. There is no question that one of these teams could easily end up in the national championship. Who knows? Maybe even 2 of them could end up in the national championship. And you saw a year ago when both these teams had freshman quarterbacks, or at least not freshman quarterbacks, but first-year starting quarterbacks, that there was it felt weird, okay, to say the least. Arch Manning was missing easy passes. Julian Sain was missing easy passes. Well, now they both kind of matured a little bit. They both kind of have that feeling of we should win the national championship this year. And you add playmakers like Cam Coleman. I think the argument, in my opinion, is who's the best wide receiver in college football. I think we'll find it out that weekend. Between Cam Coleman, between Jeremiah Smith, the running back should be elite. Steve Sarkisian, great offensive mind. What will Ryan Day and Arthur Smith throw at Texas? You look to the defense, there's talent everywhere. Can Colin Simmons be a true game wrecker? Everybody knows how talented he is. His stats are amazing. His measurables are incredible. Yeah, go do it on the biggest stage. And can Texas finally get that win, set themselves up well for SEC play? And then who knows what will happen? I think we could see this matchup twice this season, easily. For the next game that I think will end up shaping the college football season, it will take place in South Bend between 2 teams that have schedules that have been heavily criticized. It's Notre Dame versus Miami. Look, when both these teams play the competition that they essentially play, which is not much for either of these 2 teams, it makes this game matter so much more. The loser of this game has no room for it. I do not think a 10-2 Miami team makes the playoffs, unless you win the AC. I do not think a 10-2 Notre Dame team makes the playoffs, because they will not be put in the top 12, especially if those losses are to a BYU team and a Miami team, and you're sitting here and your best win's SMU. I don't think you're going to get put in. It's just kind of the reality of it. But, a little bit deeper than that, these are 2 coaches, 2 out of the last 2 years, have lost in the national title game. Marcus Freeman and Mario Cristobal are 2 of the best coaches in the sport. There's only a handful of guys that have made it to a national title. Both these guys are those guys at programs that believe that they should get back. You have the history of the Catholics with the convicts. It should be an electric game. What's going to be the difference right now in this game, in my opinion, is going to be quarterback play. I don't think there's much doubt in that. I think both these teams have incredibly solid defenses. I'd expect kind of a slugfest. I might be at this game. I'm going to a game on November 7th. It's kind of between this and the Holy War. I don't know where I'll be yet. Price doesn't matter. Not making too much money doing this quite yet. But it's one of the best games this season. Then it's been the Big Ten title a season ago. Indiana, Ohio State is my 4th game that I think will end up shaping the 2026 season. Look, Indiana under Kurt Cignetti has been a fairy tale. It's been fake. It's been Fadoozy. And they're going to be coming into this game most likely with, a 24-ish game win streak, somewhere around there. It's unreal. And then Ohio State will play Texas before this, and we'll play Oregon, if I'm not mistaken, a week after. This is kind of a must-win game for Ohio State, especially if you lose the other two. And Ohio State has struggled, other than in 2024 in the playoffs, against top-ranked teams under Ryan Day. It was his knock for a long time. He was treated the same way you treat a James Franklin or a Steve Sarkisian or a Kalen DeBoer, a guy who's been really good but hasn't, won it all yet. Well, he won it all, but you're at Ohio State. You have the most talented roster pretty much every year. Well, one championship is not acceptable. They want more. They expect more. And you're going to have an Indiana team that, probably won't be seen as talented, but you have to go on the road to Indiana, the biggest home game in program history. And Josh Hoover wants to have a Heisman moment. He just watched Fernando Mendoza transfer in and win the award, go 16-0 and win a national championship. This game will be decided absolutely on the lines of scrimmage. Indiana's got so much back on that defensive line. It's terrifying. And Ohio State struggled in big games to protect the quarterback and run the ball. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to absolutely shape the playoff picture, as well as who will be favored heading into the college football playoffs. And finally, it's one of the best games every single season. It's Georgia and it's Alabama. Look, and here's why this one intrigues me so much. One, Georgia is a very easy schedule. If Georgia wants to be, seen as one of the top dogs in the SEC, you have to get over what your Achilles heel has been, which has been Alabama. And then you look at Alabama, I think they're somewhere around 9-3 right now, or 10-2, a lot like LSU and Ole Miss. Well, all of a sudden you beat Georgia, some things change. And the feel around everything would change. There's no doubt. So, what will most likely give in this matchup? I think it'll be which team gets better wide receiver play. Like truth be to God, I think Alabama next year will be able to run the ball. I've made fun of Alabama a lot for, they're going to start Hill and they're going to expect different results. And I do think they'll get different results because I think the offensive line will be more cohesive, And I think both defenses are two of the top 10 units in the country. And I don't even think there's, 8 units better than either of them. But I think it will come down to wide receiver play. Right now, I think Georgia's going to get a little bit more wide receiver play. Plus, I can trust the quarterback play a little bit more. But who really knows in that matchup? It's obviously going to be one of the best in college football. It's the best seemingly every single year. But those are my 5 games that I think will end up shaping the college football season. Moving on. The Big Ten is a conference that, in my opinion, right now is the best conference in all of college football. So I predicted every game. I did it in short form content. You can go find it on, YouTube Shorts. But I finally thrown them into tiers. Starting off, we'll talk about the title favorites. Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, I think they're the 3 best teams in this conference. I think they are pretty much head and shoulders above everybody else. You look and you're like, they have the best coaches, they have the best players, and they've proven that they've shown up for the big moments. You can talk about Oregon hasn't won a national championship. Yeah, but they've won Big 10 titles, so who really cares? As well as Dante Moore's coming back. The wide receiver room is going to be as talented as it is. Those are the top 3 teams in the Big Ten. I don't think there's any discussion. I call it the sleepers tier, and I really don't know how many of these teams are true sleepers, but they're almost more wild cards. Because USC, everybody puts them in the top 15. I don't. Because of what happens if they don't get the +4 overalls like we're in a video game and they're very similar to how they were last year and the schedule is significantly more difficult. That doesn't seem like necessarily a winning formula. And then Michigan, it's quarterback play. How good is Bryce Underwood going to be? Washington, can everything come together? It's a big time question. For Iowa, quarterback play. And then Penn State, with how terrible the schedule is, they're going to win a lot of games. But once again, who really cares if you can't beat the top 3 teams in the conference? You can't win a Big Ten title, and you can't be a true player to make the college football, or win college football playoff games. The middle of the pack, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska. Wisconsin, Nebraska, the last coaching hires, they really haven't worked out, but they haven't been disasters either. I think Luke Fickell has a schedule where if he takes care of business, they could be a 9-win team. Nebraska, on the other hand, has an absolute gauntlet. I mean, it's hell on earth, and they haven't beat a top 10 team or top 25 team in a decade at this point, or it will be on September 19th, and they play UND and Bowling Green beforehand then. So it will be a decade at some point. I just don't think they can beat the teams in the sleeper category consistently, and get out of here with title favorites. Minnesota and Illinois, I'm a little more optimistic on. One, because Brett Beulah just has Illinois in such a position where they've consistently been really, really solid. And then for Minnesota, Drake Lindsey could be that guy. I'm from Minnesota. I've watched them for some time. Nothing's ever really pumped off the page for me. But people tell me he's really, really special. People tell me they got top 10 returning production. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, they do. Is that going to beat Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon? No. Could you knock off Michigan and Iowa and, beat Wisconsin? Absolutely. And then, going back to Illinois, Kane Hauser should be fine. I think he's very similar to Luke Altmaier. Defense should be good. Run game should be good. They're a middle of pack team that's going to win maybe 7 to 9 games. Bowl game would be successful. UCLA, Maryland, Northwestern, Michigan State. A lot of people will look at really UCLA and Maryland and go, you're pretty low on them. Maryland, for sure I am, because you know how long I've heard Loxley's going to break out. They have elite level quarterback play. They're going to win the Big Ten. Maybe not that last part, but that's my point. I've heard it a lot. It hasn't happened. Why is next year different? I just don't think it is. The schedule's not remarkably easy. You get Virginia Tech in the non-conference. Maybe you win that game. Congrats, I guess. And then for UCLA, it's just too early. Bob Chesney is a great coach. The resources are starting to get there in terms of the financial backing that it takes to be successful in a conference like the Big Ten. I just don't quite think it's there yet. Very similar to Northwestern. Northwestern's spending a lot of money. They could be very good in the near future, but I just don't think they're quite there yet. But going to Northwestern and Michigan State, Northwestern's got the worst schedule you can imagine. I mean, they play pretty much every team in my sleeper and title favorites. It's awful. I feel very bad for them. I honestly like the schedule, and I could see them beating a sleeper team, maybe even 2, but I don't think they can consistently do it. Aiden Childs, there's been a lot said about how terrible he's been. Chip Kelly is going to fix that. I think the offense will be solid. I think the defense will be pretty good. They just don't have the quality of athlete that some of these other teams in the Big Ten have. And then Michigan State. Pat Fitzgerald's a hell of a football coach. People forget what he did at Northwestern pre-NIL, where it was all just, merit. He won a lot of games. He ended up obviously leaving because of the whole scandal thing. He's back at Michigan State. Is Michigan State a very talented team? Absolutely not. But can they, beat a middle of the pack team? Yeah. They can grind out some wins. I think that's what they're going to end up doing. I think if they make a bowl game, that would absolutely be a success. And then for the basement of this conference, it's Rutgers, it's Purdue. Rutgers has talent at the skill positions, to be honest with you. Will it matter? No, because USC, Michigan, Washington, Iowa, and Penn State have significantly more talent on the outside. But there's some dudes who I look at and that guy is pretty solid. Just nothing that will break, through the wall that they need to break through. And then Purdue's pretty god-awful. Their AD came out and said, we're going to win a national championship. This is where you come to win national championships. No, it's not. You're the third best team in your own state. No. I don't think things get better anytime soon. These are not these spoiler makers of the past. And I love the spoiler makers. I very much like Purdue. But no, they're going to be a very, very, very bad football team in 2026. But let me know what you guys think of the Big Ten tier list. I don't think there should be too much disagreement between where I put these teams. And also, in the same tier, that is not a ranking. So I don't necessarily think Illinois is better than Nebraska, although I do think, that individual one is correct. But, okay, we just did the Big Ten. Now let's do the SEC. Let's put them into tiers. Just like the Big Ten, if you want to see individual schedule predictions, I did that on the shorts. Let's just go through the tier list here. Starting off, conference title, I think Texas and Georgia are the two teams that will play in the conference championship. I think they're the two far superior rosters. I think they have the best coaches. I think they have the best coordinators right now in the SEC. And could one of the contenders end up in a conference championship if injuries or, a couple plays don't go those title contenders or conference title teams' way? Maybe. But I do think they are a solid head and shoulders above of kind of that mucky upper echelon of the SEC. But let's get to the contenders, because that's really the interesting thing. Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU, Texas A&M. I look at those 5 teams. I think 2 to 3 of them could make the playoffs pretty easily. I think at least 2 of them, maybe 3, maybe even 4, could make the playoffs, but it's all going to come down to one-score games. You look at the absolute carnage that those 5 teams will do to each other. Everyone loves to talk about the depth of the SEC. I don't think this is the best conference right now in college football, but the depth of those 5 is annoying. It doesn't determine whether you have the best team in college football. The best team cream rises to the top. But what it does do is it makes it so an Oklahoma or an Alabama or a Texas A&M have the potential to be a 9-3 team, beating everybody below them and just getting into some absolute, fist fights. And it will create record inflation for conferences like the Big 12 and the ACC. It just will happen. In terms of the contenders, who do I personally think will survive? Right now, I think it'll be LSU, Ole Miss, and then most likely Oklahoma. I think those would be the 3 teams that are the best in the contenders tier. I think they're going to find ways to win games. LSU has some very important ones at home, kind of same thing with Ole Miss. And Oklahoma is going to absolutely be in a better position because they play Michigan in the non-conference, a Michigan team that I think is certainly worse right now than Oklahoma. Moving on to that sleepers tier. This is really one of my more fun tiers in any of my conferences because Florida, Tennessee, and South Carolina are all teams that on paper, I look at them and I'm like, Florida returns everything at the skill positions and on that defense. And then I look at Aaron Filio as their quarterback, and it's a big-time question. How great is John Summerall going to be? Those are just 2 massive questions. And then the offensive line worries for me also just kind of eats into that. Then I look at Tennessee, and I go, same story. They returned so much. How good is Faison Brandon going to be? I right now have them at 8-4. You can go check the schedule prediction if you want to see individual games. Can you beat Alabama? Can you beat Texas? Can you have quarterback play that makes one more play than the team in the contenders or the team in the conference titles? Can it happen? I think the skill positions are good enough. I think the defense has the chance to be good enough. Would I love to see Chaz Coleman be on that roster? Absolutely. Would you be in contenders if he was on this roster? Absolutely. Because, we'll talk about it in the next team, but I don't know if the front 4 is going to be as elite as some other ones in this conference. Not saying it's not going to be good. Not saying it's not going to be good. It's going to be better than most teams in college football. But is it better than Texas's? Is it better than Georgia's? Is it better than Oklahoma's? Is it better than Alabama's? That's kind of my worry for Tennessee. And then for South Carolina, I've been very open. I love LaNorris Sellers. I think he's a top 15 player in draft terms, like how size and how far can you throw a football, essentially. And then Dylan Stewart's a top 5 to 10 player in college football. There's no doubt in my mind. Offensive line has to be better. The run game has to be better. A lot of people called the defense a year ago mid. I disagree. I think the defense was really, really good. There were flaws. The secondary did some stupid things, but you also had an offense that literally couldn't move the ball for large stretches of last year. If the offense can move the ball, it takes so much pressure off the defense. The defense will play better. Then moving on to the bad tier. Auburn. I think Alex Golesh was the best head coaching hire of last year's cycle. Better than Summerall. Better than guys like Eric Morris. Honestly, up there with guys like Lane Kiffin and James Franklin. I just think it's too early. Byron Brown kind of gives you that feel of if everything goes right, maybe. But I don't want to put him in sleepers. I can't have every, sexy logo in the SEC be put in sleepers just because their logo is sexy. I certainly think Auburn is worse right now than the teams that I put ahead of them because I just don't know if the skill positions are there. Now, if you return guys like Eric Singleton, if you return guys like Cam Coleman, if you, return guys on the defensive line that you had a season ago, we'd be having a completely different conversation. There's no question. Because then I love the scheme so much. I love the defensive coordinator. And could it all come together? Maybe. But I think it would truly have to all come together. You would have to look, if you want to make the college football playoffs or compete for a national championship, you need Cam Newton in the flesh back there right now. And I'm not saying Byron Brown can't be that, but what I'm saying is the odds that he is that is probably sub 5%. And then for Missouri, you had him in your top 25. Why do you put him in the bad tier? Here's why. because that schedule is god-awful. And these are very much where I think you will finish the season. I don't know if I said that at the beginning of the video. Probably didn't. These tier lists are where I think you will finish. Missouri plays 5 or 6 teams inside of my top 15. Missouri cannot beat those type quality of teams. They can't do it. They've made a killing off of beating bad Auburn, bad Florida, bad Kentucky, bad Mississippi State, bad Vanderbilt, and bad Arkansas teams. That's what Missouri's been sensational at. Eli Drinkwitz against a sub-500 SEC team is, warm butter on bread. It's beautiful. It truly is majestic. You just got the worst draw in the world in terms of scheduling. It's why you are in bad. It's not because I don't think your team's fairly solid. If you play just the sleeper tier, Auburn and ugly, you would probably be in sleeper. But you don't. And it's going to be a long year because of that. And then in the ugly, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas. We'll start off with, in my opinion, the worst team in the conference, in Arkansas. Your team was more talented a year ago. You had great quarterback play a year ago. Mike Washington was electric. Your defense couldn't stop molasses in December, and that was the problem. Defense was terrible. It doesn't take me to tell you that. You used your own eyes, and you saw that. I don't think the defense gets substantially better. I don't think the offense is near as talented as they were a season ago, although, maybe KJ Jackson could end up being pretty good, but I don't think he is what he was, or is what they had last year, excuse me. And then Vanderbilt, you lost so much. And don't get me wrong, Jared Curtis is going to be good in the future. He's a 5-star kid. He's a great quarterback. Not right now. I don't love starting freshmen in the SEC or starting first-year guys in the SEC. It's the reason why Florida's as low as they are. It's the reason why Tennessee's where they are. Vanderbilt, I don't think has as talented of a team a year ago, and I don't think they'll be able to make up for that. Then Mississippi State, same kind of story. Kamario Taylor. In fact, all 4 of them, all starting first-year quarterbacks. You look at Kamario Taylor. Yes, he played some games last year. That's sick. The congruency's not there. The team's not incredibly talented. I got a cowbell behind me. I've been to Starksville. It's an amazing place to watch a game. They are not going to be good. They just aren't. Now, will Kamario Taylor get one of these teams, maybe a contender or even sleeper next year? I fully believe they could do that. Same way they almost watched Arkansas, sneak up and beat Texas A&M a season ago just because of how elite that quarterback play was. I could see that happening for Mississippi State next year, but wire to wire, they're not going to look like an incredible team. And then Kentucky. A lot of people tell me, well, look at the transfer portal haul. It's nice. Offensive line's elite. There's really no mind that I don't think on that offensive line won't be great. My biggest worry is the skill positions are way too injury prone. There's so much inexperience on that roster. Kenny Minchie's a first-year quarterback, which I hate in this conference. And then, there's going to be flaws for Will Stein in terms of he's never been a head coach before. And it's the same thing with Summerall. It's the same thing with Alex Golish and same thing with Silverfield. It's they're going to learn some things this year. None of them have rosters that first-year coach LSU has or first-year coach Pete Golding has. They don't have those quality rosters. They also don't have those quality of expectations. And I think we're going to, see that in terms of kind of exactly how this year plays out. But that is my SEC tier list. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Moving on, we have the Heisman talk. Everybody loves the Heisman. Everybody loves to know who's going to win it. Yada, yada, yada. For my sleepers, we'll get to them first. I have 3 guys. LaNorris Sellers, Josh Hoover, CJ Carr. Starting off with LaNorris Sellers. Why is he here? Because his freshman campaign was special. His sophomore season was a disaster. The offensive line is going to be significantly better. I think the play calling is going to be significantly better. And if those 2 things are as good as I think they might be, I think he'll find a lot of success. Nick Harbor is still a really, really talented wide receiver. Then you look at Josh Hoover. He's a turnover machine. I don't care. Mendoza looked like he turned the ball over too much when he was at Cal too. When you raise the quality of athlete around you, you're going to turn the ball over less. He's in a system that just produced a Heisman Trophy winner. That's kind of why he's here. And then CJ Carr. I think if CJ Carr played a more difficult schedule, he could probably easily win the Heisman with that Notre Dame roster. But the problem is when you look at what does it take to win the Heisman, you have to have big moments against big teams. Fernando Mendoza against Ohio State just had one of those nights. Joe Burrow in the SEC title had one of those nights. You can kind of go down the list of Heisman winners and be like, that's the moment he won it. I don't think CJ Carr is going to have the opportunity to have that moment because I don't think the schedule is going, in full transparency, be tough enough. But now let's get into who are my 4 guys that I think actually end up in New York and have the chance to truly win this award. At number 4, I have Arch Manning. So much is going to be said. He's the most overrated quarterback in college football. He was until fourth quarter against Mississippi State. Go Bulldogs. Then he turned it on. He flipped that game, and it really flipped their season. And yes, did he play great against Georgia late in the year? No. It's a Georgia defense. Very few quarterbacks play truly spectacular against that defense. But also, look at how much more talent he has. Hollywood Smothers is a beast. Raheem Brown's a beast. Coleman's a beast. The offensive line's shored up and certainly has improved. He's going to put up the stats. He's going to have the opportunity for the Heisman moment. And oh yeah, people who vote on this award are like sports newspaper people. Like, it's Manning, the Manning name's going to carry, the Texas name's going to carry, and if he has stats that are close to what it's going to take to win the Heisman, and none of the 3 guys that I have in front of him have fantastic seasons, they're going to give the Heisman to Arch Manning. Welcome to reality. He needs to have a season that is on par or similar to the guys that he's going to be compared against, and he's going to win it because he's at Texas and because his last name is Manning. That's how the world works. Moving to 3, I have Dante Moore. He's going to put up ungodly stats. He's going to play in a Big Ten title game, which will help him if Oregon's, of course, makes it. The Ohio State game on the road is going to be a big opportunity. And he has all his weapons back. He has the wide receivers back. He has one of the best tight ends in the country. The offensive line should be shored up. The running game should be incredibly solid. They have another year of experience. And they're going to win a lot of games. No Will Stein worries me. But the problem is they don't play anybody that tough early. It's not like they're going to start off and, they're going to play Texas. They're playing Oklahoma State. Whoop-de-doo. Oklahoma State doesn't play defense. Who cares? They're going to win. They're going to win that game, and they're going to put up a ridiculous amount of points. And I think that's what Oregon's going to do throughout most of the season. And it's why I think Dante Moore is going to find himself in New York, very similar to how Julian Sayin did a year ago. You complete a bunch of passes, you don't turn the football over, and you let your skill guys be your skill guys, and you play far inferior competition. He will have a very Julian Sayin-esque route to New York. It is what it is. Moving to number 2. It is, in my opinion, been the best player in college football for the last 3 years, but this is a quarterback award. It's Jeremiah Smith. Well, what's going to be different next year? Why is he going to end up in New York next year? Well, look at the schedule. Ohio State a year ago played, nothing. They played nothing in the regular season outside of Texas. Texas wasn't that great at the beginning of the year. Well, now you play a Texas team that, for all intents and purposes, should be really good. You play Indiana, you play Oregon, you play Michigan, you play all these games that are going to have you front and center. And he is the best player. And he's going to make play after play after play. And he's going to have the counting stats because he's going to need to have the counting stats if this team wants to win. Everybody's talking about Arthur Smith runs the ball so much, he won't get his counting stats. He's the best player in America, buddy. They're going to get him the ball. And the one thing I want to see him do a little bit better, and I think will really help push his campaign to potentially go on and win the Heisman, can he do the little things right a little bit better? Because when you looked at the Miami game, that pick 6 was because he just completely missed his block on a wide receiver screen. That's not necessarily a countable stat, but it is something that some voters will hold against you if you don't do things like that correctly. But he's the best player in America. He is unguardable, and I think he will end up in New York. But going on to the guy who, in my opinion, will end up truly winning this award, it's Trinidad Chambliss. I think with the schedule that he's got and all the quality competition that Ole Miss is going to play, mixed with the fact that he's shown a year ago in that quarterfinal game that he can play hero ball, the mix of those things I think are going to end up having him win this award. Everybody knows he's probably the best returning quarterback in college football, and I don't even think it's probably, if we're all being honest with each other. He's probably is the best quarterback in college football. How great's the wide receiver play is a little bit worrisome for me, and then no Charlie Weiss is a big deal. It truly is, because what's the difference between him and potentially Sam Levin ending up in New York? Well, what if Charlie Weis was kind of like the guy who, made everything come together, put the puzzle pieces in order and made it look like a beautiful little masterpiece of a puzzle. And really, Trinidad Chambliss was just kind of a big piece of that puzzle, but certainly not the whole thing. Only time will tell. I watched Trinidad Chambliss in person in that semifinal game. He looked good enough to win. He is truly special. His third down inefficiency was a bit of a problem, and it's going to need to be improved. But there's no reason to believe that that does not have the opportunity to potentially happen. Moving on. There are teams where it is truly now or never in terms of will they get it done. And we're going to start off with South Carolina. I did a lot throughout this episode talking up South Carolina about how good they could potentially be. But in all reality, if it's not this year, I don't know when it's going to be. You have LaNorris Sellers. You have Dylan Stewart. You have a new offensive coordinator. You have talent coming in on the offensive line. If you don't get it done now, what's the excuse? You can't fire any more coordinators. The defense won't get better or more talented than it will be next year. If it's not now, good riddance to Shane Beamer and really this iteration of the South Carolina Gamecocks. Another team that I think is in a very similar situation is Baylor. Very much like South Carolina, there were a couple of years where you looked and you were like, well, everything's finally coming together. It's looking so good. But then it never really materialized. It never really stabilized. And now DJ Lagway is at Baylor. And if they don't look good, I think Dave Aranda's gone. I think with the schedule that they have, they need to be an 8-win team. And it's really going to start when they get Auburn week 1. That has to be a win. And if you win that, you can build some momentum heading into Big 12 play, and you could end up being a really solid team. But the expectation at Baylor right now in the NIL era is to win a lot of games. The money, from what I've heard, is getting held very close to the chest with the understanding that they're going to want to support the next guy. It feels like he is kind of a dead man walking at Baylor, but wins can solve everything, and he has one more year to show that he can truly get it done. These next two teams are not necessarily like South Carolina and Baylor, where your coach is, a couple games away from getting fired. But I think Texas is now or never. When you talk about how much they return, when you talk about how much they brought in the portal, if things don't come together, I don't think they're ever going to come together. Truly. Because you have Arch Manning coming back. You have guys like Ryan Wingo coming back. You bring in Cam Coleman. You bring in Suwannee. On the defensive side of the ball, you have Colin Simmons. You have so much God-given talent. You brought in Will Muschamp. The schedule's pretty tough, don't get me wrong. But to win a national championship, you have to beat elite-level teams. That's not a new concept. And if they are unable to do it, yeah, I don't know if you're going to have a roster as good as this one in the next 5 years. I don't really think you are. So for that reason, it's absolutely now or never. And just like Texas, another team that everybody says can't get it done, I have Oregon here. Because if Oregon cannot break through with everything they have coming back, you have Dante Moore coming back, you have Evan Stewart coming back, you have all those wide receiver pieces, you have so much on that defensive line, you have Finney coming back, you brought in Parrish. Yes, 2 new coordinators is a big deal. And maybe I'm not looking close enough at the coordinator situation for Oregon, but come on. You can only make so many excuses before push just has to shove. And I've been one of those guys who's defended Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian a lot, because I do believe this narrative of if you haven't won a national championship, you're not a good coach is incredibly stupid. I can only defend something for so long. At some point, you have to win. I think this Oregon team has to win. And I don't know if they have to win a national championship. I don't know if Texas has to win a national championship. But what they do have to do is win their conference. What they do have to do is at least make it to a semifinals. I think making it to a national title, anything can happen. But I very much do think it's now or never for those two teams to win it all, because your roster's not going to look that sexy for some time. But time for my favorite segment, the North Dakota State segment. Looking into 2026, we're going to start with the offense. What are the question marks? What's the known? How will everything really mesh and blend together. Starting off with the quarterback position, Nathan Hayes is really, really good. And I have a lot of reason to think that he has elite level athleticism. He has a stunning arm. And if he can consistently make the right decision, he's going to be tremendous. My biggest worry is that he might think his arm's a little bit better than it is. He might try to put the ball in places where the ball should be put. And the NDSU offense, if you turn the ball over a lot, it's not as good of an offense by any means. Then next, the running game. There's still lots of questions. DJ Scott, Miles Mitchell, how is it all going to work out? I think it's going to be amazing. And the best case scenario for NDSU is there's a physicality on the offensive line and at the running back position that nobody else in the Mountain West can match. Because SDSU and Montana State and Montana and UND have spent years learning to match the physicality of NDSU. Well, that's your X factor right there. I don't think we are as talented on the outside, offense or defensively, than the top teams in the Mountain West. You know, maybe when Christian Watson was here or Bryce Lance was here, but not this year. Although Jackson Williams is really solid. So the X factor has to be the run game. The X factor has to be our ability to control the clock. I think there's absolutely a chance that that happens, but only time will tell. And then finally, like on the outside, Jackson Williams is a beast. He's a guy that is a game wrecker. He's a guy that can change things, but there needs to be more than just him. How good's Malik Collins going to be? Can he stay on the field? That's been his biggest problem. Drew Kessel in the passing game is going to be amazing, but there's no Bryce Lance. There's no Christian Watson, and NDSU hasn't seen a team now in half a decade that doesn't have a top, 3-4 round wide receiver on it. What's it going to look like? I think it will be fine, but will it necessarily be elite? And then defensively, okay, the defensive line, in my opinion, is the best they've had in years. Guys like Elijah Wayne, Vanderpool, they're going to be studs. Keenan Wilson is a beast. And I don't know if there's, a Kylie Manuel on there, but there's some guys that certainly have a lot of talent and really do have the potential to be game wreckers. And that's going to, once again, a lot like the offensive side of the ball, that's where NDSU has to kind of make their killing, is this idea that they have a physicality on the defensive line. You cannot run the ball against them. And you're going to force these teams into just being pass first or pass really only. And then, put your nose down and get to the quarterback. Who will help them with that? Those linebackers. Gavin Sell needs to step up and be a big-time player. But there's no doubt that Donovan Woolen should be starting for an SEC team. I think the fact that he was not bought by Michigan or Alabama, like Sterling, who left, rumored to get paid $750,000, something near there, high six figures. Donovan Woolen was just better. I assure you, my Bison did not offer him 7 figures. No. So he stayed to be a part of the culture. He stayed. Maybe he knew the ideas that they're going FBS. But Donovan Woolen was the best linebacker on that team. Point blank, period. He's going to be the best linebacker in the Mountain West, besides maybe Jackson Eck. Jackson Eck's a beast. No doubt. Got to give credit where it's due. But he's definitely a top 2 linebacker in the conference. Safety position, very senior-led. Lots of experience. I think that will be very, very solid in a secondary where they're going to need the help. We lost 2 corners on either side. The secondary could be scary in terms of where the cornerback situation is going to be, who's going to play. Russell's going to be really young. Got the transfer from Notre Dame. How's all that going to look? I think everything will kind of sort itself out, but you're also going up against probably the most talented wide receivers week in, week out that NDSU's ever seen. The secondary is by far my biggest worry. But overall, looking at this 2026 roster, this is not a vintage NDSU team. This is not a 2019 team. This is not a 2017 or 18 team where you're like, there's so much NFL talent everywhere. It's impossible, to lose. That's not what this team is. There's great players. Griffin Empey's great. I think Anini is going to truly be an all-conference type player. DJ Scott's going to be good. But there's some guys kind of deep in the depth chart, like the transfer from Holy Cross, like longtime track guy. He has the build to play football. He needs to produce. And is he can be a guy who gets a handful of carries. He has the athleticism. He has the speed. He's got to be able to know how to use it. But if everything comes together, this team should be really good. Probably somewhere between, 8 to 11 wins. Next episode, we'll have a true record prediction. And if none of you guys could tell, there were a couple times my phone filled up with storage. Just gonna be a couple weird cuts. But let me know what you guys think. Leave likes, subscribe if you have not already. And God bless. Catch y'all in the next episode.